Hi everyone, I'm Alex Rosenfeld, founder of Freshwater Investments, and this is Coffee with the T-Bird podcast. I sit down with fellow T-Birds who are making an impact in business, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Each episode features conversations that explore the pivotal moments, personal motivations, and lessons learned on their journeys. Whether you're a student, alum, or someone passionate about business and personal growth, you'll walk away with fresh ideas. This is a bit more than a podcast. It's a platform for connections, storytelling, and celebrating the global spirit of Thunderbird. This podcast is sponsored by Freshwater Investments. At Freshwater, we make it simple for you to invest in large apartment communities across the United States so you can earn passive income, grow your capital, and benefit from real estate tax breaks without owning or managing property yourself. Hello, everyone. My guest today is Bill Goodwin, a former CEO and leadership coach who spent over 20 years scaling and transforming companies across multiple industries. He's led organizations ranging from 20 to 400 employees and helped take a telehealth company through successful exit to Walmart. Today, he works with founders and leadership teams to build aligned, high-performing businesses using proven tools and real-world experience. Bill holds an MBA from Thunderbird, and when he's not helping companies grow, he's usually outdoors, traveling with his family, or training for his next cycling or hiking challenge. Bill, welcome.
Alex, great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited for today's conversation, and maybe we can start with your hiking adventures. I've read that you did rim-to-rim hike in Grand Canyon. Can you? And I was curious about that hike, and I was thinking maybe I'll do it myself one day. So can we start there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I live in Phoenix, and the Grand Canyon is only 3.5 hours away, maybe. And so you can do the South Rim, which is like a 16-mile hike. You can do rim to rim, which is like 23 miles. So you're going from the south to the north, or the north to the south.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can do rim to rim to rim, which is where you go all the way to the north, and we usually stay the night, and then you go all the way back to the south. And I've always loved doing kind of more challenging athletic events. This is usually something I do not by myself, with a group of gentlemen who also are not maybe mentally there that we do these things. And it's beautiful, right? The Grand Canyon is, a lot of people have been to the rim, but they haven't gone down in it. And you just don't get the perspective you do until you're down in the canyon. So, yeah, it's so much fun. It's tiring. Your feet hurt. You're complaining half the time.
How long did it take you?
So to go rim to rim takes us about 10 hours each way, or so. Because you go down you have to hike 9 miles down, and then like 6 or 7 across, and then you go up the other side, the other canyon, another 6 or 7 miles. So it's a fair amount of time to hike it.
So it's a full day adventure. You're starting early in the morning.
We start like 4 in the morning. You got your headlamps on, and you're out there, and it's beautiful. If anybody ever gets a chance to go to the Grand Canyon, I recommend they hike at least just a little ways down, because the view is so beautiful.
And what's the best time of the year to go and do this hike?
So late fall, early spring are the best 2 times to go. And the reason why you don't go in the summer, or try not to, is the bottom of the canyon, which is where the Colorado River is only about 1,000 feet in elevation. So it's basically the same temperature that Arizona is in the summer, 105, 110.
Wow.
So summer's not the best time to go. So we usually go late spring or early fall.
Excellent. Okay, let's rewind back a little bit and talk about where did you grow up, and about your childhood, about your family, your parents.
Yeah, so I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. My dad was a professor at the University of Colorado. I used to go to Colorado Buffalo games long before Dion was there, as a little kid, and loved it. Went to school, did my undergrad at Colorado State up in Fort Collins. My first job out of college was working for a department store chain. Mm-hmm. And it was actually the best paying job out of college. I like to say I had some desire to be in retail, but that was not the case. But growing up in Colorado was great. I spent until I was 30 was the first time I moved away from Colorado. Lived in Denver for many years. And Colorado is just a great state. Very active growing up, very active in my 20s. Had a couple different companies that I was at while I was in Colorado. Skied a lot, obviously, mountain biked a lot.
What's your favorite ski resort or ski area in Colorado?
Springs.
So
And
that's your go-to place.
that's the go-to place. It's a little off the beaten path, but it's beautiful. It's a town, and it's just a beautiful place to ski.
How long does it take to get there from Denver?
So it takes about 3 hours to get there from Denver.
Okay.
So not as busy as a Vail or a Keystone or those, but the skiing is just incredible. It sounds like you skied, or do you ski?
I do ski. Yeah, I went to Breckenridge a few times. So
Okay.
it's a great
Yeah,
resort.
Breckenridge is great. Peak 8,
But
9, and 10, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I need to explore the steamboat as well.
Yeah.
Talking about your childhood, did you have a dream job, or did you run a small business on the side while in high school? Any early signs of being an entrepreneur?
Well, kind of. I always had 2 or 3 jobs in high school and in college. Both, one because I had to pay for part of my college, but also because I just liked earning money. Now, I didn't start my own company, but I was, it's like, oh, I'll do that. So I would scorekeep for City of Boulder recreational softball games. I would cook at restaurants. I would work at the university's health program, being a gopher, running errands for some of the staff there. Anything I could find, really.
Wow. Where did you learn how to cook?
By signing up to starting as a dishwasher at a restaurant, and then somebody didn't show up for work, and they're like, okay, well, can you help on the salad line? And then somebody else doesn't show up, and all of a sudden you're like cooking like actual meals for people. You just kind of worked my way up in the restaurant scene. And so you'll love this, by the time I was 18, there was a restaurant in Boulder called the Famous Pacific Fish Company. And it was display cooking. So you're behind glass. The whole restaurant can see you cooking. And so I have this big mesquite grill in front of me. It must be, I don't know, 3.5, 4 feet wide or diameter. And then you probably have 30, 40 pieces of fish and steak, and you're just in the scene and you're cooking. And I was doing that at 18. I was loving it, right? Restaurants are very fast moving. It's fun. So it was a fun experience. I think everyone should work in a restaurant growing up in some way, shape, or form. Waiter, busser, cook, hostess, because that's where I think you learn some of this service
great
stuff. Yeah.
So do you still cook at home?
No,
No,
I got totally burned out on cooking. I mean, my wife always gives me a hard time. Like, why don't you cook salmon? I'm like, I worked at a fish restaurant and I cooked salmon, lots of salmon every day, 5 days a week. I don't want to be around salmon at this point. So, yeah, no, I don't cook that much.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about your Thunderbird chapter. How did you hear about Thunderbird? Why did you decide to attend Thunderbird?
Yeah, so it was an interesting point. The quick story is I left Colorado to go work for a company here called Insight, which is a big computer reseller, hardware and software, back in the mid-90s. I started my own company, a training and development company, because I had been in that before. And my company actually got acquired. It was a very small company by Micro Warehouse, Mac Warehouse. Most people don't know that name because it doesn't exist anymore. It got acquired years ago by CDW. And so I moved to New Jersey to go run these big sales operations in New Jersey. Well, after about 2 years of being there, that company got bought out by Michael Ovitz, Jerome York, some names that people from the 90s would know. And they didn't need what me and my team did. We were building a sales organization, and this was actually right before the first .com crash. So they were going to be, computer equipment online. They didn't need sales organizations. So I had a severance, and I'm like, I want to go to grad school. And we were either going to go to Thunderbird and move back to Phoenix, or I was going to go to University of Denver. both places that I liked. I went and talked to the people at Thunderbird, talked to a lot of grads, and I just said, this is the school that I want to go to. So without a job, we moved back here to Arizona and started at Thunderbird and loved my time at Thunderbird. It was a great experience.
And what's your favorite memories of being at Thunderbird, studying at Thunderbird?
The biggest thing was I was in the EMIM program, the executive program, EMIM 10, so the 10th cohort at this. And the relationships that I formed and the friendships and the work together, you spend a lot of time with these people and they become really close. And so one of the best things I loved it was the community of my class. The other thing that I really loved was the diversity of the curriculum, right? You were working on cross-cultural stuff. You were working on finance stuff. You were working on really interesting business case and trying to solve or understand how you would apply some of the things that you were learning. And I really liked the variety of Thunderbird. So even though, because you went there too, it's an international degree, but what you learn is far more than just international, right? You learn things that can be applicable in any situation. And that I really enjoyed there.
So how did your career grow from there?
So, the interesting thing is I thought I would do more international and I haven't. That seems, the Thunderbird name and degree has a lot of clout, but I haven't done very much international. Some describe my background as eclectic, but here's what has happened. Typically, there has been a business that needed some infusion of either sales, marketing, executive leadership, a COO, a CEO, and I've always loved going into different companies. So in mid-2000s, I got recruited to go to Kansas City for an e-commerce freight company called freightquote.com and help them grow their sales and marketing. And it was, that was the largest organization I've run at, like 400 people. And that was fantastic. And then after that, we decided we wanted to live in Arizona full time. So we moved back to Arizona, and that chemical company that I had run needed help again. So I went back into that. Then I found an opportunity for a healthcare data analytic company and ran that for 4 or 5 years and scaled that, which then led to a telemedicine company, took over as CEO for that, and then scaled that and sold that to Walmart. So Alex, I've been in chemicals, I've been in e-commerce freight, I've been in data analytics, I've been in healthcare, I've been in training and development. There isn't really a pattern there other than, nobody ever hires you because things are going well. They want to change. And I've always liked kind of that new opportunity, new industry, something different to go jump in. Some of those were really good decisions. Some of those I kind of regretted a few months in, but you still make the best of it and turn it into something. So
let's just pause for a second and talk about that regret. Why is that? What was the decision that maybe today, looking backwards, you can say, I wouldn't do it. I would do something different.
Yeah. So, one of them was the healthcare analytic company. And really, I knew it was going to be a turnaround, but it was far worse once I got in and started looking under the covers. When I started looking at really what the status of the customer base was. And, I think there was a little bit of it wasn't necessarily a bait and switch. I just don't think the people who were running it knew how bad it was, and they didn't know where to look to determine it. So it became much more of a true turnaround, just a very, we've got to do something fast in 12 or 18 months, or we'll probably be closing the doors. Now, in hindsight, Alex, you learn a lot from that, right? It forces you to really perform and move at a higher speed than what you'd like, and even be more of a risk taker than you're probably comfortable with. And fortunately, it worked out, but it was, I was just scratching my head 2 months in.
So you mentioned that they didn't know where to look for those things.
Yeah.
What's your approach when you're joining a company? What's the first things that you're looking at?
I look at a few
KPI?
things. Oh, yeah. Well, the first thing I look is anything around the customer base. I want to understand how stable or unstable it is. And so you can look at, customer acquisition costs. You can look at customer retention. but you also need to talk to customers. So I actually go out and talk to customers, both ones who are still engaged and ones that had left within the last 6 months, to try and understand that, because you have to have revenue and something coming in to help you if you're going to turn something around. So the whole frame of the customer, what they're buying, how long they've been buying, are they still buying, are we seeing stability or not? That's one area. The second area is deep within the financials, just trying to understand specifically how are they managing growth. And if they're not growth, where are we spending money? Where do we have opportunity to improve our cash flow so we can fuel more of our growth with organically versus having to borrow or use equity, and really get close to how we stand financially. The third one is actually culturally, like what type of culture do we have here? And you've been in a lot of different companies. I think what happens is you have the culture that the leadership teams thinks it is, but you have the actual culture that is being lived. And oftentimes there's a disconnect. So I try to understand, is this the right culture? Is it a performance-driven culture? Is it one that is the people are passionate and engaged in what they're doing? Because even if you figure out the customer thing, and even if you figure out the financial thing, if you don't have the right chemistry within the organization, you're not going to fix or scale it. And then the last one, which I slightly alluded to, was operationally. How well do we execute? What's our speed, our cadence? How well does information flow up and down? How well are we grabbing employee information and feedback and then acting on that? So operationally, every company I've gone into, there's always a chance and an opportunity to increase what I call your operational speed. You used to be able to operate at 65, 70% of what you were capable of and grow your business. I think now it's become, because it's so competitive, because the speed of information is so fast, you need to be operating around 80, 85, 90% of your capability. 100% isn't sustainable. That's just people redlining it all the time. So you have to figure out how to get to 80, 85%, and then I think you can win. But a lot of organizations aren't operating there. I'm sure in some of the ones that you've worked with or consulted with, you see just a lower speed than probably what's needed for the business. Is that true?
Well, I never consulted. I run my own company, but I can see there are times when we're operating at 100%, and there are times when we're operating much lower. I think it depends on market conditions as well, and what's going on in the in the real estate industry. But I think that you went from sales and marketing job to being a CEO.
Yeah.
How was that transition like for you? And so let's say when you go into that CEO job interview, what it's like?
Yeah. So, I mean, the transition was I came up the sales path, the sales and marketing, eventually becoming a C-level, basically EVP of sales and marketing, then went into a COO role and then a president role before I had a CEO role. What I found was the sales and marketing, that was great, but I needed to kind of hone my operational chops and make sure I knew how to be a better operator, beyond revenue generation. And so I did a lot of that to build that kind of what we just talked about, that execution discipline and that ability to really understand how to manage your operations really well. The CEO role was one I had always wanted to have. And I started with a smaller company. It was 30 people at the time that I took over. And I knew I had a lot to learn, but the discussions were really about crafting a vision. Where do you want to take this business? What do you see as the opportunity? And so, for example, the healthcare data analytic company, this is going back 10 years ago. I've always been a huge believer in the power of data. And if you can leverage that data to help others make better decisions, then you have something that you can monetize. And so that I saw, it wasn't healthcare that attracted to me. It was the data and the analytics that attracted to me. And I figured if I'm going to go up in the CEO route, I need to find a company where I can do that, where I can kind of tightly manage it. So really for the CEO role, I think it's hard to get your first one unless you start your own business. But at the same time, what I found is there are a lot of companies that aren't seeing the success that they like. And so they start looking for people who have some degree of CEO experience. So I think there's always an opportunity to get into it. It's just a question of Are you consciously trying to round out your experience so that you are well suited? And if you have operations experience, if you have revenue generation experience, you already have a lot of what is involved within a CEO.
Got it. So you applying for a CEO job, and you going to be interviewed by that company, and you probably went through several of those.
Mhm.
What was your experience like during that interview process for a CEO job?
Well, some were better than others, but mainly I looked at it more as a relationship forming, right? So less of an interview, more of trying to understand specifically what are they looking to have happen with the business? Who are the people involved in this? Where do they see it, the potential being? And so I just I don't think of it as an interview. I mean, I think of it more of a let me understand what you're trying to do, and we'll see if I'm the right person for that or not. And I think that's the only way you can do it because how else do you know if that role is a fit for you, right? I mean, it may not be the right fit for you. So I'll give you an example. When I took over as the CEO of the telemedicine company, the founder, I probably had coffee and met with him over 6 months and talking and just sharing ideas about how he could grow the business and getting to know him. And then it was almost when he asked me to come in. I mean, I wasn't even expecting him to ask me to come in to be the
Hmm.
CEO, but when he did, I was like, well, great. I know this person. I know what he wants to have happen with the company. And he moved to chairman of the board and I took over the organization. And so that was like a 6 month process. So anybody who's interviewing for a CEO role, I think you had to put on the learning hat of really trying to understand what the business is, what do the shareholders want out of the business, where have they gone wrong, where have they gone wrong, what do you think value you could add to that, and then see if it's a match for you as much as it is a match for them.
Hmm. Great, and it's a good segue to talk about this company, the telehealth company. So you joined the company as a CEO, and what's your first three top action items on your to-do list, day one,
Yeah.
first 30 days, first 90 days?
Yeah. So the first 30 days, give or take a week or two, are really about pure observation mode, learning the people, learning what they're doing, trying to learn the business at the same time, trying to get educated on the customer base, on how they operate. And so it's a lot of information, a lot of question asking, and a lot of information absorbing. And I try to stay very conscious to not start trying to solve things or jump in because you shouldn't. You should allow yourself the permission, give yourself the permission to hear what people have to say, to see what they're doing. So that's usually the first 30-ish or so days. And after that, I start working closely with the leadership team and trying to understand where have they been trying to take the business. I want to understand what is in their head today. Uh, and then third, we start getting real critical about building what we need for the future. Here's what I found at that company. I found that, like I said, the operational speed was not what it needed to be. We were a telehealth company competing with Teladoc and MD Live. I mean, the behemoths, if you know anything about telehealth, you've probably heard of Teladoc, and we were smaller. And I'm like, okay, we get to accelerate our operational speed, no question.
Yeah, let's just pause for a second. Let's talk about telehealth
Sure.
as an industry, and just for listeners who didn't hear about this term or maybe learning about it. Can you just give a kind of overview of telehealth and what it is and how it works and why is it a big industry now?
Yeah. So when I took over the company a year or two before COVID, telehealth was still very small and not a lot of people knew about it. Now, telehealth, the most traditional sense that people know of is when you're not feeling well, you have a cold, you have the flu, maybe a strep throat, whatever it might be, maybe you have COVID, you would be able to rather quickly through phone call, video, or through an app be connected to a doctor who's licensed in your state to have a medical visit. Usually from that virtual, yes, correct.
Okay.
Virtual medical visit. The doctor may not even be in your same state, but that doctor is licensed in your state. And you would have a prescription then electronically sent to your local pharmacy, and you could usually go pick that up in 15 or 20 minutes. That's what most people think of. And that's still probably 90% of the telehealth visits that are occurring in the US. And let me go through another segment, which is behavioral health. So nationally, we were also doing mental health, so virtual mental health. So think of your traditional licensed therapist that normally you might have gone in the past into their office. But now you can do that virtually for a half an hour or an hour. So we were doing mental health therapy across the country as well. Now, telehealth has evolved a lot because of COVID, but still the majority of visits are urgent care, episodic. And then the second most are behavioral health, which continues to grow. But there's also virtual primary care, there's specialty visits, there's dermatology, there's second opinions. There's a lot of things you can do virtually now that you couldn't do before. Now, when COVID hit, obviously telehealth became the norm. That was the only way you could see a doctor, and for a little while. And so, before COVID, utilization was here, then COVID was up here, and now it's settled to a new norm that's above what it was pre-COVID. But still, it's a very attractive method for people, especially around urgent care and especially around mental health. So I think those two areas will continue to grow the most.
Okay. So yeah, and we paused at the operational speed. So I'm just I'm bringing you back there.
Yeah. So operational speed was one. Two, I actually realized I had a pretty good team, but there was a degree of dysfunction in the team. Bear with me here. My view is every leadership team is dysfunctional. All the teams that I have run have been dysfunctional. The question is, to what extent is that dysfunction, right? And I don't think you can fully remove all of it, but you can reduce it. Your leadership team is the core component, I think, of how an organization grows or doesn't grow, period. There where strategy meet plans, there where discussions go down in terms of leading the organization. And so if you can take out dysfunction, so that's why I did it at MeMD, was really try to decrease dysfunction. How do you decrease dysfunction? One is you have to strengthen connections between individuals on the team. Vulnerability-based trust, no ego, no pretense, getting people super connected so that they can then say what they think without fear of what I think or what someone else on the team thinks. That's another way to do it. Two is to slightly raise the expectation in terms of what it means to perform. Like, that's great that we say we can do that in 6 months. What do we need to do to get it done in 2? So it's like 6 months isn't going to work when you're competing against Teladoc. So operational speed, dysfunction, cleaning that up as much as I can because I had good people. And then the last one was I realized we had to quickly, what I call outpunch our weight. We were playing against the big boys. So to do that, we started doing press releases all the time. We launched 3 new service lines within 90 days, virtual primary care, men's health, women's health. We went on the offensive in a way that really made it seem like we were bigger than we were. And so we started getting more business. So couple those 3 things together, Alex. You decrease some of the dysfunction on leadership teams so it works better. You increase your operational speed, and you get very focused on trying to go out and get new business by making yourself a little bit bigger, promoting yourself, outpunching your weight, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so that worked pretty well. So by the time COVID hit, we were already growing much faster. And then when COVID hit, that's when we were tested a little bit from an operations standpoint, but we did pretty well throughout COVID.
And so when you joined the company, was it a goal to position the company and scale it so that it can be acquired, can be sold?
That's right.
That was your mission when you joined the company?
That was my mission. That was my mission, and that's part of what excited me about it is my plan was to more than double the business in 2 to 3 years and then have an exit for the shareholders. The company had actually been around for 9 years before I got there, but they weren't at the level that they needed to be to command a high valuation. Mm-hmm. So we went very aggressive on driving growth. We optimized and fueled a lot of that growth ourselves without having to go out and raise additional capital or leverage debt. So we were in pretty good position when we decided to sell it later in 2020. is when we put it on the market. So probably 6 to 9 months after.
So you're saying that you didn't have to raise any additional capital. How did you finance that growth? Was it just free cash flow that you generated?
Part of it was free cash flow. We really tried to optimize our operations. So as we scaled revenue, we were very looking for improvements with our operations team that was on the phone calls with patients, and how do we optimize their workflows? How do we accelerate payments from customers, right? How do we delay? And so we really got quite good at, we were kicking off 67 to 70% gross margin. So it became more of an operational discussion on how do we drive great efficiencies. And the majority of our operational cost was people, frankly. And so we were just very reluctant to hire as we scaled and just create more optimized workflows is the best way to think about it. The other one was around in your cost of goods, your cost of services, physicians are the biggest expense. So we tried to make sure we held those fees fairly constant as we scaled, and that worked out pretty well.
Great. And so when did you realize that company is ready for the sale? What KPIs did you look at and you see that, well, today valuation is great?
Yeah, so 2 years in, we had more than doubled our revenue. We were on a run rate at the time that we were acquired at about 3x what our revenue was prior to me taking over. We knew that probably there wasn't going to be a better time to sell than during COVID. So the timing was, we decided that we were going to do this in July of 20. So you're 4 months into COVID. We finally got the SIM out, the book out. So what I'm saying is, we went to market. We had a banker. We were preparing all the materials. And then in late November, December of 2020, we were out sending teasers to the market. And then by the spring of 2021, we were talking to potential acquirers. So we went pretty fast, but we kind of realized that COVID, no one knew how long COVID would be here, but we also thought that interest in telehealth companies is probably higher, and we can't predict the future. So, we've doubled revenue. We're on a run rate for triple revenue. Our metrics look great. Our customer base looks great. Our team is brilliant. They can execute. I didn't think there'd be a better time than when we did it.
So let's talk about the mechanics of that deal and transaction itself. So you mentioned that you guys went to investment banker. They took your deal, created all the marketing materials, went to the market. What's next?
Well, so after they created all the materials and went to the market, when you go to market, typically you're sending out teasers, 1-page or 2-page, de-identified, to a list of potential buyers. Those potential buyers could be private equity, could be strategic buyers, right? Somebody who we'd be a nice add-on to. Those are the two main categories. And depending on, we had a list of, 250 teasers were sent out to. And then, you wait to see if you get a request for more information. And if you get a request for more information, you sign an NDA, and then you send them this big, thick thing called a CIM, confidential information memorandum, which tells the whole story of the company. Doesn't give away completely your secret sauce, but it kind of, it just tells them a lot. And then from the people who get that, then some want to have meetings with you. Usually there's a few meetings beforehand. And if they like what they're hearing, then you usually go into an LOI, a letter of intent, with one or more, depending on what level of interest there is in your organization. And so for us, we went through, I can't tell you how many NDAs I signed, but it was a lot. And then we had a lot of conversations. But, from 256, we got down to a much smaller number of people who were generally interested, but we were happy to see the response.
How was your work day like during that time? Did you work like 12, 16 hours talking to all the potential acquirers?
Yes. So you still have a business to run, right? So you still run your business. You have these meetings with potential acquirers. Sometimes it's often more than one meeting. They're 2-3 hour Zoom calls, but that eventually then shakes down to a smaller subset. The real long work days did not happen until we locked in with an LOI with Walmart. And that's when it was 14 to 16-hour days for 6 months, really.
That's when they started their due diligence.
Oh, yeah. And, Walmart is a company. First of all, I was impressed by Walmart. I loved working for them. It was a great experience. Their level of due diligence and time commitment is the best I've ever seen. And so a lot of it was they had a lot of people on a lot of Zooms, 4, 5, 6 hours every day for close to 6 months. Plus, you had a business to run. Plus, you had to prep for those Zoom calls. Plus, you had to debrief after those Zoom calls. So it was a chaotic time. At the time, you don't know if you're going to survive it. But we did. And, I felt good about that.
That's great. What's kind of the nature of the due diligence? What they trying to understand and what questions they trying to answer?
Yeah. So they range from financial to operational to cultural to quality of customer base and growth potential. So they go through a lot of different areas. Now, we had a platform too, right? We were a tech-enabled healthcare service. So we weren't a SaaS product. We actually manage a network of hundreds and hundreds of doctors as well who would provide the care on our platform to patients. And so there's a whole clinical aspect and quality of that. There's a HIPAA compliance aspect. There's a technology security aspect. And so depending on what someone's business is, it really depends, but you can always assume there's going to be something around quality of earnings. There's always going to be something around operational capabilities, strength of your customer base. Does the future look bright for what you're doing? Is there opportunity for growth? How strong is your team? Is your team capable or not? A lot of people sell a business and they are the team. They are the person that impacts your earnings if you don't have a team that can do the work when you're not there. And then also cultural, thinking about the organization. So Alex, we might have 4 hours of Zoom calls in the morning that were all around our platform. And then we might have 4 in the afternoon that were all about one aspect of clinical delivery. And did we have documented X or Y? And then the next day it could be all around operations. The following day it could all be into, if you had to look over the 6 months, I bet we talked about the customer base 11, 12, 13 times. Same on the platform. Plus, you also have all these questions that you have to answer, massive spreadsheets, and you have to populate a data room. For those not familiar with it, you've got to put in all your data, all your financials, all your clinical procedures, all your diagrams of how your technology works. It's a lot, but it's just kind of a process over 6 months of them getting familiar with your business. At the same time, you working to communicate in a way how valuable your business is beyond just what is on the paper, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
How we operate our culture and stuff like that.
Right. And how many people on Walmart's side did work on this deal?
That's a great question. Probably of actual people we had contact that were Walmart employees, I'd guess 40 or 50. But we also had, in terms of number of Walmart attorneys. Now, here's what impressed me about Walmart. Walmart used the top firms. And on each of these calls, in addition to Walmart employees, you had anywhere from 3 to 7 to 8 external attorneys who were sitting in on these calls. So here we are, this little small company. We're going toe to toe. We've got, they had some incredible people on it. And it was exhausting. At the time, if I asked my wife, she'd probably say, Bill, I'm surprised you have any hair left, because at the time it was intense. It's exhausting. You don't even know if you're making the best decisions because you're worn out. But in the end, we sold the company. And in the end, looking back, it's kind of like that was a great experience to go through that, because I can't imagine another due diligence process as thorough as that one.
So how did he hear from them that the deal is approved, the investment committee is okay with the proceeding and closing the deal?
Yeah, they just let us know that they wanted to move forward. Now, for Walmart,
just a simple email or call from Walmart's CEO?
From their No, not from their CEO. We're not, even though we sold for a pretty high valuation, that was not, we were still small in Walmart standards for that. We did talk to their head of Walmart US at the time, but he was not the one who communicated that. Walmart has a whole corp dev group that does nothing but manage acquisitions and divestitures. That's what they do. So a lot of our contact was with that team. The other thing to think about too is when you have a big organization such as Walmart acquiring you, you are going to play by their rules. So you're going to have an LOI and it's going to be exclusive. You cannot talk to anybody else. That's a risk that you take. But okay, well, we were willing to take that risk. 2, you work off of their paper, period. You're not going to be able to put your own contract in. And, you have to be comfortable with that. You don't really hold the cards necessarily. Now, that doesn't mean that we sold for a good valuation, a more than fair valuation, and the shareholders were happy. And we did a good job of really maximizing our value, but it was still a process to go through that was challenging, no question.
Did they try to negotiate the price during the due diligence, or was it they just wanted to make sure that they paying the right price?
That's right. That's exactly right. They did not negotiate the price. Now, when we closed, when the agreement was signed, we had 6 weeks where we had to complete a lot of contingencies, and that can be around like our platform. It was around our platform. There were some around commitments from customers, a few different things. They wanted to make sure that we met those before it was official. But that was it. No, they did not negotiate. Walmart, and then I ran virtual care for Walmart for 3 years, which was, I had never been in a company that big. And I was actually a little nervous going in. But in the end, I was impressed with the way they operate because they're data driven, because they're very thorough, they're kind, they're going to make sure that everything is fair, accurate, and really good for Walmart, but also good for the other party. It was actually a really good experience in the end.
Did you have to move to Bentonville in Arkansas?
We negotiated that we were not going to move. And we did that also because most of our operations were here in Arizona. So to move part of the leadership team to Walmart, it was, not probably the best decision. Now, since then, Walmart has, a lot of the healthcare division and other divisions. Walmart over the last 12 months has been bringing more people back to Bentonville, which is not atypical compared to some other big companies who are doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife used to work for Walmart.com, and so this operation were here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But let me ask you. So you got that approval from Walmart. You receiving that wire in the company checking account, and how did you feel at that moment? What thoughts were going through your mind?
So it wasn't. It was a partial sigh of relief that we had gotten to that point, but I also knew that our job was not done, right? Our ability, specifically my ability to integrate the company and do a good job for Walmart, that was in front. Portion of the sale was an earnout over a couple of years, and you want to do a good job, right? If someone bought your organization, it wasn't like you walk away and you're committed. So to me, it was more of like, okay, here we go. This is the next chapter. Now we have to go perform, and we have to figure out how to make healthcare work in a company whose primary focus is not healthcare, right? They were in healthcare for the right reasons, but we were not their core competency. So how do we make this work? How do we be successful? How do we grow inside this very large corporate organization? And so the work was just beginning, Alex. I think to me, it was kind of like, okay, let's go. Okay, so let's go make the next 2 years really good so that all the employees and all of us who came over, and my job to integrating the company, that we make it work for everybody.
Great. So any interesting lessons from that experience working for Walmart?
The one that I reflect on a lot is, Walmart has 1.5 million U.S. employees. It's the biggest employer in the U.S. What I've learned at a company like Walmart is your ability to form strong relationships, not just with the people who directly influence how well you're going to be able to succeed, but the people who indirectly and those around those that indirectly influence it. So that the understanding that relationship power and connection and communication, because there's a lot of stakeholders. And so if you're not good about building the relationships, so then you can have the informal discussions that help you then move your initiatives forward, you're never going to succeed. So it doesn't, like, it's not not like my boss makes the decision. Well, yeah, he kind of does, but I have to build relationships with all the people he's talking to as well if I want this to move forward. Even running small companies or small to medium, I mean, under 400, you don't have to do as much of that. At a bigger company, you do. And understand that that is like the number one job description, I think, of the head leader who comes over in a transaction like that is build relationships, period.
That's great. Okay, I think it's a good segue to go into your next career move, and you
Oh,
were
yeah.
advising, and coaching
Yeah.
business, and so I'll ask you a question that might be interesting for our listeners. So let's say someone is running a small business and they want to scale and they want to position it so the business becomes sellable to Walmart, to any other big company. Kind of your main strategy is to scale a business and make it attractive for the acquisition.
Yes, I think, well, I mean, it probably depends on the business a little bit and what they want. And if they're looking to scale it to a much higher number for a higher valuation because the exit is what's meaningful to them, then it becomes a fairly comprehensive thing they need to look at. So, I mean, the first one I usually start with is strategy, which is, who are we? What's differentiated about us in the market? Why should somebody work with us versus somebody else? How do we make that sustainable over time? How do we build a differentiated solution or product or whatever it might be to have more people come to us? If you're doing things the same way, if your strategy is the same, if you're pricing the same, if you're distributing the same, you're not gonna differentiate. So create a very compelling, clear, differentiated strategies. The second one is around people and making sure you have the right team, people, and if you're a very small company, it may be the right partners that you outsource it to help you scale your business more effectively. Because quite often, a lot of the people that got us to where we are today are not going to be the ones that help us level up the business. And so being very thoughtful and conscious about our people strategy is a critical part of it.
While we're talking about people, and you probably hired a lot of people during your career. What's your approach to hiring?
So, one is cultural fit. Are they going to work? Two is, are they somewhat contrary to what, for example, if they're working for me, what I believe or think? I don't want just yes people. I want people who are willing to challenge so the best idea can win. So culture fit, contrary. Are they smart? Are they performance driven? Do they like being in a culture that's very committed to excelling and growth? And then I kind of look for three things. So these are the three things that I ask about. Especially, you can ask this about anybody you're working with today to know if they're the ones who can take you to the next level. One is knowing what you know today. Would you enthusiastically rehire them? So if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, or it's a hesitant yes, then you have to do some digging to see if they can help you make the leap to scale your business. So one, you'd be able to answer yes, I'll enthusiastically rehire them. The second one is they don't need to be managed. So as a CEO or owner of a business, your job is to lead people, but you don't have time to manage people. And there's an important distinction between the two. And then the third one is that they will regularly wow you. They come up with a new idea. They have something that they do something that you weren't even planning on them doing, and they do it better than you even could imagine. So would you enthusiastically rehire them? Do they continually, regularly wow you? And do they not need to be managed? I'm looking for that when I interview people, but I'm also doing that when I go work with a client. We will assess their team and be asking those questions to try to understand, do we have the right people in place? So
Great.
people, strategy, and then execution, which we've talked about a few times, is building a discipline and a culture around execution, making sure we have the right KPIs in place, the ones that matter. Don't worry about the rest. It's a handful of KPIs. That we have scoreboards, that we communicate quick, that we are able to really go out and hit the market. And then the one which you touched upon a little bit earlier is cash. How are we going to fuel our growth? Growth costs money. And I think if people are serious about growing their business, they have to have sources of capital. And for each owner, that's different what works for them. Ideally, most of it they can generate from their business, but that's not always the case. So they may have to look at other financing instruments as well. So when
Okay.
I go in, that's what I work with clients on is really, you want to scale? Great. Let's get your people right. Let's get your strategy right. Let's build a culture of execution that's top notch. And then let's make sure we have the cash to fuel the business.
And how do you feel about giving up equity for skills? I mean, or capital mostly.
I think personally, I think that's an individual decision for each owner. That's obviously my last preferred source of capital. I typically I'd rather use debt over equity when possible. Equity comes with some trade-offs, and not all equity is the same. Not all equity partners are the same. Not all structures are the same. So if people are thinking about equity, well, what are you getting for that? Right? Are you getting a quiet partner? Are you getting one that has governance rights? Are you getting one that has controlling interest? So I think I think you should know what you want out of private equity before you do it. Otherwise, you might find yourself. I mean, at MeMD, we talked to a lot of private equity firms even before we went to market. I mean, I put together my own little sim and promoted that to some PE firms. And, for us, that was not going to be the way to go. It was just not, it was too much of a cost to pay for that amount of capital. So I think people have to be very, what would you call it, Alex? Just very step back, really understand what happens and what's involved with a specific equity partner before you take that money.
Great. Great. So tell me a little bit more about your current practice so that our audience know what do you do and where you can help other people building and scaling their businesses.
Yeah. So, I went into this because, and I've always done a little bit of business coaching and consulting on the side for the last 7-8 years, because I look back at the businesses I have scaled. I've made a lot of mistakes. I mean, it's great to focus on I've had 2 exits, one of them being a really good one to Walmart. I've had some other ones that I've scaled, but it's been far more difficult and painful scaling these businesses than it needs to be. So I like actually going in and working with CEOs and sometimes their leadership teams to help make scaling not as frustrating, not as much drama, make it so they can scale more rapidly and in a way where they don't have to give up the farm. And that's enjoyable to me, to work with teams, because really we make it more difficult on ourselves than we have to when trying to scale. We just do. And it's not intentional. We're pursuing too many initiatives. We're not clear. We're not creating a differentiated strategy. We haven't built that culture of execution that will allow us to outperform others. So using a coach, whether it's me or somebody like that, can be very helpful if they're just like, we want to accelerate this and we don't want to be dreaming about or having nightmares about work every night. They want to actually make it a little bit more fun while they scale their business. So that's what I do. I'll be working very intensely with leadership teams 4 or 5, 6, 7 days in person a year. I do CEO coaching. I do executive coaching as well, individual coaching, really to just help them scale their business more rapidly.
Excellent. Well, it was a great conversation. And before we wrap up, I just want to ask you a few quick questions. What advice would you give to a 20-year-old self having all this knowledge and experience today?
Don't worry about it. So 90% of the stuff we worry about never comes to fruition. I'll tell you a very quick story on that, Alex. My dad, unfortunately, passed from melanoma some years back, but he never worried throughout his life. And I'm like, how come you don't worry about anything? And he learned from his dad, who was a depression, raised 4 kids in the depression. He said, my dad basically never worried because he said 90% of the stuff we worry about never comes to fruition. I was worrying about everything. How am I going to do my job? And I was just worrying about everything. Should I take this risk? Should I not? How do I perform? the amount of worry and pressure we put on ourselves is too much. And again, 90% of the stuff we worry about doesn't come to fruition. So don't worry. I think that's it. The second one I would say is take risks. I've taken risks throughout my career. Some have panned off. I mean, if you're looking for an equity opportunity, if you're looking to grow your career, if you're looking to expand your thinking, I think taking risks is good. And if you're in case, you have more flexibility to take them than ever. So take risks. And
excellent advice. Thank you. So what's your next travel destination?
Great question. We would love to go. Well, I'm going to Austin, Texas, but that's not super exciting. But next summer, the plan is to go. We've been to Europe the last few summers. I love Europe. And I'm a big also bicyclist. I do a lot of cycling.
Mm-hmm.
And Tour de France, I want to go see a couple stages of the Tour de France next year. So I'm planning, hopefully we'll do that. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's 9 months from now.
That's great. Well, Bill, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience. Thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.